just crossed a major threshold. We just crossed a major milestone. We've entered the second century of electronic media. The second century of electronic media is going to involve something radically different. And some of the other speakers spoke about it earlier. You know, the previous century was dominated by one-way broadcast media, television. The next century is going to involve participatory media, where people talk to each other and have conversations. I'm incredibly excited about this. I've spent my entire career trying to find ways to involve more people into their video, into their media. And so I'm thrilled about the prospect that finally, now, we're going to have the opportunity to reclaim the power of personal narrative. Storytelling is a fundamental part of the human experience. From the beginnings of time, humans have defined themselves through their stories. Every culture, every religion, every nation has defined itself with a parable, a story, a mythology, a history. And so do you. Your lives consist of stories, and stories that we tell to each other. Because face it, life doesn't make any sense. If you think about it, you may wake up one day with a plan. You're going to go out and change the world, right? And then when you walk out the front door, life meets you and confronts you with changing circumstances, and then for the rest of the day, you're in reaction mode. Most of us spend most of our day in reaction mode. And it's really hard in that time to figure out what's important because you're dealing with the changes and you're constantly making contingency plans. It's only afterwards that we have the opportunity to tell a story, and that's how we structure meeting and random experience. And what we do is we kind of recapitulate the events of the day. We put them in a logical sequence, we put them in order, we emphasize the important parts, and we omit the parts that are less relevant. And what do you know? We've turned random experience into something that makes sense. But it's meaningless until we share it with somebody else. And so every story that we tell is a kind of exchange. We're trading ideas with other people. And what we do is we offer our story, and they give us in return, in exchange, their acknowledgement that our story makes sense. So that's how we structure meaning in our experience. What we really crave is a kind of approval. We're craving validation. People crave validation more than sex, more than money, more than anything on earth. Validation is the most important thing. When someone listens to your story and says, yes, I understand, that sense of validation gives you relief. You're not crazy. You're not all alone. You're not isolated. You're part of something. For the last 60 years, we've outsourced our storytelling to professionals. I'm referring to television and broadcast media. For 60 years, we've let these terrific storytellers in Hollywood tell us the meaning of our lives. And they do it in a great way. They take familiar elements that we all recognize. So we project ourselves into those stories because we identify with them. And then they mix in a little bit of the fantastic or the fabulous, so it's bigger than life. And that's how we get validation on a massive scale. They're giving the entire nation validation every single night on broadcast TV. So that's a fantastic experience for people. I wouldn't be surprised if the next show we see is something like this, kind of a mashup of these reality experiences, something like Dancing with the Real Mob Wives of Jersey Shore, or something along that line. You know, the ultimate reality mashup, or maybe the ultimate dysfunctional family circus. But I'm not just referring to the kinds of narratives you see in drama and reality shows. I'm actually referring to all types of TV. For instance, there's other people on television who we've outsourced meaning-making to. Journalists, for instance. So journalists take the complex events of the day and they put it into a logical, tight sequence where we sort of feel like, okay, that chaotic event now makes sense to me. In fact, the TV is great at coming up with experts, no matter what the crisis is, no matter where it's happening. If there's a nuclear meltdown or a financial meltdown or some sort of environmental disaster, there's always a bunch of experts on TV, and they've got these handy answers for us to the world's crises. And they're in a tiny bite-sized format that's really easy to understand, called a soundbite. So we look at that and we get validation from that as well. We look at that and we say, yeah, now I understand that complex crisis. None of this comes for free, folks. None of it comes for free. There's nothing free on TV. You're either paying a monthly subscription for your cable service or you're paying attention to advertising, but in either case, you're paying something. It never comes for free. So there's another kind of an exchange. TV, as we all know, is there to get you to watch and buy something. You know, the product of television isn't the shows. The product of TV is the audience, which is converted into consumers. And so the shows are really just a kind of bait, a lure, to get you to bite down hard on that commercial hook. In this example, you're the fish. So let's take a look at those little mini narratives, because actually about a third of what you watch on broadcast TV is a commercial. So our regular TV show, our narrative that we're watching, is punctuated periodically by these commercial breaks with lots of mini narratives. And these mini narratives also have easy answers for us. They answer difficult questions like, what kind of car should I drive if I want more adventure in my life? Or what kind of beer should I drink if I want girls to think I'm sexy or sporting? Or what kind of pills should I take if I've got anxiety or depression? Or what kind of pills should I take if I want to have an erection that lasts the whole weekend? So TV's got an easy answer for just about every problem. The answer is go buy something. A few years back, when I was starting my career, I went to get some advice from an advertising executive. He was an older fellow, and I went in to see him, and I said, tell me, what do you do every day? Like, what's your job? An advertising executive. And he said to me, well, this week, I'm inventing a disease. I said, no kidding. And he said, yeah. He said, look, my client is a skincare company, a cosmetics company, and they have a new skincare product, but it's a very crowded field, so we have to find a way to differentiate ourselves. And so what I've done is I've hired some scientists, and they're conducting research in office buildings, the kinds of buildings that most people work in, where the air is recirculated throughout the day. Well, as it turns out, these scientists discovered that recirculated air, it dries out your skin. And they called this condition skin stress. So it's a new disease. Guess which product was the ultimate antidote for this newly discovered condition? Yes, of course, it was his client's product. It solved the new condition of skin stress. That's how TV works, folks. This process is really the process of manufacturing an identity that you identify with, a story that you see familiarity in, and then you start to identify with it so much you crave that lifestyle, and you'll go out and make that purchase in order to obtain that lifestyle. And so this process of selling us an identity that's really revolved around manufactured needs, requires that we be reminded 20 times every half hour about our inadequacies, imperfections, and failings in life. That's how it works. We're constantly being reminded that there's a shortcoming in our lives. So you have a role in the TV narrative, the grand narrative of television, just like any actor with a script. You're given a role. Your role is to be a consumer. Your role is to go out and buy something. Our job as TV viewers is consumption. Now, this is an interesting word, consumption. Just 2 generations ago, it had a radically different connotation. Consumption was a disease. It wasn't just any disease, it was the deadliest disease ever known to man. More people were killed by pulmonary tuberculosis than were killed by the Black Plague or any other disease in history. This was a dreadful disease. They called it the wasting disease. And I think that's actually kind of an apt metaphor for where we are today. The wasting disease. It hasn't gone away, folks. It's metastasized to a global level, and it uses broadcast television as its primary vector of transmission, promoting a lifestyle of unsustainable consumption. But, as some of the other speakers have noted, perhaps we've reached the apogee of television. For the first time ever, the numbers are starting to suggest that people are finding something else to do with their evening instead of being programmed with ads that tell them about their weaknesses and deficiencies. So people are starting to seek out something else. Now, the TV folks will argue with me, and they'll say, no, our business is doing better than ever. And that's true. TV's in okay shape. It's going to be with us for a very, very long time. But what's changing is that we're waking up from a 60-year trance. And what we're realizing is nobody did this to us. We did it to ourselves. We gave up. We relinquished our power to tell stories. We gave that power away, and we can take it back. And now we're being seduced by something so much more powerful. I'm talking about social media. You've heard other speakers tonight talk about social media, and this is a tremendous change. It's sweeping the world. Of the 2 billion people using the internet around the world, most of them participate in social media, and increasing numbers start there and spend their day using social media. Social media is so seductive. It asks you to tell all about yourself, all about your interests, your likes, your dislikes, your passions, the things that you're working on, your projects, your background, your experience, your education. Tell me all about your friend. It's like the greatest lover you ever have. No wonder we're falling out of love with television. And social media does something else that TV can't do. It gives us validation in a way that TV never can. When you post something and someone shares it, or when you change your status and someone likes it, you're getting validation that's instantaneous. It's better than instant gratification. You're getting validation that's directly personal to you, and that's an incredibly powerful feeling. It's incredibly addictive. Now, what happens, I think, is some people look at that and they say, well, gosh, social media is totally trivial. It's not a long-term thing. It's a fad. It's a passing fad. It's superficial. It's vain. It's narcissistic. And there may be some wisdom in that. My view is a little bit different. I say, hey, these are brand new tools. We're just learning how to do this. We haven't been in the habit of telling stories about ourselves for about 60 years, so we're just learning now how to use these tools. And my experience in working with audiences that want to participate is actually they have good stories to tell. For instance, in 1992, I spent a long time traveling around the world shooting interviews with people with a film camera. I traveled all over South Asia and interviewed people, and they told me about their lives, their dreams, their aspirations, their hopes, young people like these people in these photos that I took at that time. Not one of them identified with a skin disease. At that time, I was very moved. I'm always looking out for people who have a great vernacular, a great way to tell a new story. And at that time, I heard the story of Dan Eldon. He published these journals, and his journals were amazing. He recaptured the art of the diary and turned it into fine art. He reprocessed his experience. And my friends and I bought these books. We were blown away by the artwork of Dan Eldon. But Dan was much more than just an artist. He was also an activist. He lived in Africa, and he traveled around Africa, organized transport for refugees in Malawi. He was also a photographer, and he was one of the first war zone photographers to go in and photograph the humanitarian crisis in Somalia. And these photos were picked up by Reuters and distributed to magazines and newspapers all over the world. And they moved nations to act. His photographs, his stories, caused nations to take action. And the UN sent troops in to Somalia. So this one person with his art, with his storytelling, was able to move nations to action. Now, Dan had a very short life. And Dan died when he was 22 years old. He was killed in combat in Mogadishu. But he actually touched thousands and thousands of lives. And his mother, Kathy Eldon, started a foundation in his honor, and she invited me to join the board of directors. And this foundation has had a profound impact. It's called the Creative Visions Foundation, and we back creative activists. Those are people, a creative activist is someone who takes a story, who does some social good and tells a story around it. And so they're structuring the meaning in their experience out in the field, and then they're broadcasting that with every means they have, through the internet, through a documentary, through a book. Let me give you some examples. Jessica Mayberry started an organization called Video Volunteers in India. And Video Volunteers goes out to rural villages, where many of the people are illiterate. There's so many illiterate people, they don't even distribute newspapers. They're off the grid completely in India, and as a result, they're underrepresented in media. She realized she can't teach everybody to read, but she could teach one person in each village to tell a video, to make a video, and she's done that now. 350 villages have been wired up, and they're now starting to tell the stories of their lives, and the stories that they're telling expose corruption, bribery, rape, land theft. She's moving the nation, and now those stories are starting to be shown on television. She's created a little network where they actually take the videos out to the region, out to the field. They'll take them into the villages, and people get to watch the stories of each other, so they get validation that there are other villages having these same experiences. So she's single-handedly creating this network of video. Here's another creative activist. This is Barton Brooks. Now, Barton likes to get his hands dirty, as you can see in the picture. You won't find him in an office. You'll find him in Uganda, or you'll find him in Cambodia, or perhaps in Haiti. His project is simplicity itself. It's called Guerrilla Aid, one person, no organization. And what he does is he goes to a community in need. He'll find small communities that aren't getting attention from big organizations. He goes out to a community in need and takes an inventory of what they need, and then he posts it on his blog. He'll post a video, he'll post a photo, and he'll invite people who are looking at his blog from all over the world to PayPal him the money. He says, if you wire me the money, I'll put that water system in. I'll build that shelter for those kids. I'll build an orphanage. And he's done this again and again and again with Guerrilla Aid. He was one of the first to build schools. He was on the ground in Haiti right after the earthquake, and he organized the communities there to rebuild the first 2 schools that were rebuilt. He bypassed that whole system of volunteer support and aid organizations that came in. He got people moving immediately. Another example is Dana Gluckstein. Dana's been a successful commercial photographer for 30 years. But on the side, she's cultivated an interest. She's been taking photographs of indigenous people, tribes people. Everywhere she goes in the world for work, she always takes time to go find the indigenous people, and she'll take their photographs. And these photos are incredibly beautiful photos. In the mute expression on a tribesman's face, she tells volumes about their experience in the world. And when it came time for her to publish the book, Dignity, and to have a gallery exhibition for it, she decided to do something more than just a gallery exhibition. She used it as a springboard for an advocacy campaign to make the world aware of indigenous peoples and to make the world aware that there was a declaration that was voted on in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Now, this UN declaration, had been signed on and voted by everybody in the UN except for 4 countries that voted against it. Those 4 countries were Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States of America. To our great shame, we didn't want to sign or endorse this Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and so Dana used her gallery exhibition to generate awareness, to generate outcry, to generate action, and people took action. They signed the Amnesty International petition. I'm thrilled to tell you that in December, President Obama indicated that the United States would be the last country to sign that Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, so she made that accomplishment. Now, these are just the stories of 3 of the creative activists, and I'm well aware that Creative Visions Foundation is not the only foundation in the world that is supporting creative activists. In fact, we're proud of the fact that this is a worldwide trend. People are reclaiming their narrative voice. And what they're discovering in the process is that they don't need a store-bought identity. And they don't need the easy answers from television. They're starting to perceive the world in a different way. They're starting to understand the world as a series of urgent questions. Questions like, why is this situation happening? Why is this the case? How can I change it? What can I do? What resources do I have within me to make a change? And then they tell that story to the world. They're using the incredible tools of social media, personal broadcasting to get that message out to the world. And what I would like to encourage everybody in the audience tonight to do is to seize that power. Go out now and reclaim your power to tell a personal narrative. Use your social media to tell people about what you care most about. Use your power to express those concerns that you've got. Answer the difficult questions that you're facing in life. If you can't go to Haiti or Cambodia and make a change, then find someone who is and support them and endorse them. That's something that you can do. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support.